Hey everyone, and welcome back to our latest explainer. Today, we're tracking a situation in the Middle East that is escalating at an absolutely dizzying pace. Literally, in just a matter of days, the whole geopolitical landscape has flipped upside down since that regional ceasefire collapsed. And look, as always, we're not here to take sides. Our goal is just to lay out the data, look at the reports, and check the official statements from the ground so you can actually understand what's going on in this incredibly volatile environment.
So, to really frame this, I want you to ask yourself, what exactly happens when 100 hours of continuous heavy military strikes hit the Middle East? And, that's not some hypothetical rhetorical question. That is the literal reality of the past few days. We are looking at a massive, massive scale of military action. We're talking land, air, and sea. It's pulling in multiple countries, it's shaking up global markets, it's chaotic, right? But we're going to untangle this whole thing step by step.
Okay, here's our roadmap to make sense of the chaos. First, we'll track these 100 hours of escalation. Then, we'll dive into the U.S. strikes on infrastructure, followed by Iran targeting regional bases. Next, we're heading out to the water to look at the blockades in the street. And finally, we'll zoom way out to look at the global economic fallout. Let's jump right in.
Chapter 1. 100 Hours of Escalation.
The sheer speed of this conflict is just staggering. I mean, think about this timeline. Hour 1, the ceasefire collapses. Fast forward just 48 hours, and you've got the US and Iran trading heavy regional strikes. By hour 72, the whole thing spills over into the water, right into the critical Strait of Hormuz. And now, hitting that 100-hour mark, reports are coming in of a 6th consecutive night of US strikes on Iran. The momentum here is wild.
What we're witnessing here is a textbook escalation spiral. Basically, it's a cycle of continuous retaliation. One side takes action, and that provokes an even heavier counteraction from the other side, back and forth. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. Grasping this concept is absolutely crucial because it explains how highly localized skirmishes can just suddenly explode into the multi-front conflict we're seeing right now.
All right, Chapter 2, U.S. strikes on infrastructure.
So what's the stated objective from the U.S.? Well, according to a statement directly from U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, they launched precision munitions hitting dozens of Iranian military targets. They're specifically pointing to things like coastal surveillance sites, air defense systems, logistics, and maritime capabilities. Basically, the U.S. maintains that their goal here is to degrade Iran's military capacity.
But if we flip the lens and look at reports coming out of Iranian state media, we get a much broader picture of what actually got hit. The official IRNA news agency is reporting widespread damage to civilian infrastructure. We're talking 7 bridges and train stations. 3 blasts reported at the Iran Shah airport in the southeast. Down south, the control tower at the Bandar Abbas port was hit, with strikes spreading all across coastal provinces and even way up into places like Khuzestan and Loristan.
And look, we have to talk about the human cost behind these data points, because it's heavy. The Tehran Health Ministry reports that 38 people have been killed in these U.S. attacks since the ceasefire broke. And that includes some really devastating reports of casualties from those bridge collapses in Hormuzgan province.
Moving on to Chapter 3, Iran targets regional bases.
To understand the rationale for the counterattacks, we have to look at the official statement from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. They said, and I quote, "Crossing red lines and attacking civilians in civilian infrastructure will have a very severe and devastating price to pay." They essentially put neighboring host countries on notice, warning that if this path continues, even more crushing responses are coming.
And we saw that regional spillover almost instantly. Let's map this out. Over in Qatar, the IRGC claims they hit the Al Udeid airbase, specifically targeting U.S. fighter jets and MQ-9 drones. In Jordan, they claim to destroy U.S. refueling aircraft at the Al-Azraq base, though Jordan says they actually shot down 3 incoming missiles. Meanwhile, in Kuwait, their energy ministry reported a fire at a water and power desalination plant from an Iranian attack. And Bahrain had sirens blaring as defense forces intersected aerial attacks targeting the Shaker airbase. The conflict is spreading incredibly fast.
When you stack these targets side by side, you really see the asymmetrical warfare at play here. On one hand, U.S. strikes hit heavily into Iranian domestic infrastructure, right? Bridges, train stations, airports. On the flip side, Iranian retaliatory strikes were pointed almost entirely at U.S. military assets and allied utility grids, air bases, drone hangars, radar sites. It's a really stark contrast in tactical priorities from both militaries.
But hey, quick time out here. We are very much in the fog of war, and we need to remember that. Case in point,
The IRGC claimed they hit the U.S. Al-Tanf military base in Syria. But the Syrian military themselves actually came out and denied those reports, pointing out that U.S. forces had already withdrawn from that base earlier this year. So just a vital reminder to take initial, fast-moving reports with a grain of salt.
Okay, Chapter 4. Blockades in the Strait.
This conflict has totally upended the maritime theater. CENTCOM released images of U.S. Marines boarding a tanker called the MT Wenyo, enforcing a renewed blockade of Iranian ports and disabling oil tankers. In response, we're seeing drone strikes on merchant vessels. One of them, off the coast of Basra, was literally carrying American-branded cars. Maritime security groups like the UKMTO are investigating a bunch of incidents off the coast of Oman, and sirens are just constantly sounding across the Gulf.
And adding fuel to this massive maritime disruption is this number, 20%. Donald Trump recently announced a proposed 20% toll on ships trying to cross the Strait of Hormuz. He's effectively framing it as a kind of guardian fee to reinstate the Iranian blockade.
So it boils down to two completely clashing missions in these waters. The U.S. forces maintain their naval presence is all about keeping the strait free and open for global trade. But in direct opposition, Iran is threatening a much wider blockade. And if that actually happens, it puts massive global shipments of crude oil, liquid natural gas, and fertilizers at severe risk.
Which brings us to our final chapter, global economic fallout. You might be wondering, why does a localized 100-hour conflict in the Middle East matter to someone watching in London or New York or New Delhi? Well, it starts right here with your energy bills. As tensions spiked over the Strait of Hormuz, Brent crude oil briefly surged above $86 a barrel, the highest we've seen in a month. It's pulled back slightly to around $84, but the market is totally on edge. Any more disruptions in that strait, and those numbers could absolutely skyrocket.
And that energy shock, it ripples straight into inflation. To put that into perspective, look at India. The economic fallout is hitting incredibly hard there. Wholesale price index inflation has spiked to an unbelievable 9.87%. This is being driven by massive jumps in global food and fuel prices triggered by this exact conflict. Supply chains are panicking, and the cost of living is rising everywhere.
But we can't forget that behind every single economic data point is a human reality. The fallout isn't just about money. Reports show that 13 Indian nationals have been killed and 3 are missing in the Gulf since this reignited. Migrant workers and international citizens getting caught up in the crossfire, it's a truly heartbreaking reminder of the global human toll of this regional war.
All right, let's pull all this together. Here are the key takeaways from today's explainer. We've seen an absolutely dizzying 100 hours of rapid military escalation. Critical infrastructure is burning on both sides. The vital Strait of Hormuz is effectively choked by blockades and threats of tolls. And the ripple effect is severe global inflation and oil market shocks hitting wallets all over the world. Which leaves us with this final, burning question. With infrastructure in ruins, the human toll rising, and global markets shaking, where exactly is the off-ramp in this 100-hour escalation spiral? As both sides dig their heels in, finding a diplomatic exit just seems more and more complex by the day. We'll be keeping a very close eye on the data and the reports as this develops for sure. Thank you so much for hanging out and breaking this down with me today, and I'll see you in our next explainer.